and welcome back to Backstage. We just heard an amazing performance of Harnasie by Szymanowski, and I think most of the dramatic moments in that piece came from the London Symphony Chorus, and the man responsible for their performance is their chorus master for today, David Lawrence.
Hello,
that
Rachel.
was brilliant.
Didn't they do well?
Yes, really
amazing
really
piece.
well.
You don't get to hear it very often.
No, I mean, as Sir Simon went on, I heard him say, you know, there's probably a handful of people that have heard this piece.
That's right. I didn't know of it until we were asked to work on it, and but then when I got to know it, it's a fantastic story about the piece, let alone the story that's within the piece as well.
So how long did you work on it with the choir?
Can't tell you too many secrets, but we had sufficient rehearsals to get to grips with it, amongst all the other projects, of course, that the chorus were working on. And as you can tell, the music for the choir is very loud and it's very high all the time. So that was colourful in rehearsals, because you can't sing high and loud for 2.5 hours. So we had to find other ways of rehearsing it, of course.
And they're singing in Polish.
They're singing in Polish, and not just Polish, but in a very specific dialect of Polish that comes from the southern part of the country where this music was written and where the story is set. Yes.
So I'm sure that not everybody speaks Polish.
No, not at all. We had a wonderful vocal coach who's an expert in singing the folk music of that area. So Nina, and she helped us amazingly. It was very demanding and very encouraging, and made us feel we could do it. Whether or not we did,
I think you did.
I'd like to think.
And so I think 2 or 3 nights ago, that very chorus sang Candide with Marin.
Yeah.
So you couldn't have two more different works.
No, that's a really, really big piece. And the chorus has been, I can't quite remember the statistics, but I think they've been singing 9 days in the last 12 or something like that. It's a huge commitment. But speaking to some of the chorus earlier on, they were saying that, you know, they would give up 12 days out of 12 if they could, because they absolutely love. They've got the experience of singing with one of the world's best orchestras, doing some of the most extraordinary repertoire that you just can't do with any other chorus.
And these guys they're regular guys who have jobs, aren't they?
Yeah. Teachers, doctors, nurses, lawyers, etc. Yes, and they give up their spare time, and clearly most of it, in order to come and sing here, which is wonderful.
So you were involved with lots of the LSO's singing initiatives, not just that chorus. Can you tell us about the other things that you do for us?
Very lucky to be part of the family here. I work with the LSO Community Choir, which is an adult chorus, but an adult chorus that's unauditioned. So we still get to sing with the orchestra every now and again, and do some very, very interesting projects. We've got some very exciting things coming up. I also work with one of the youth choirs as well, the senior youth chorus, the Discovery Choir, who are great, again, unauditioned, and wonderful, and very central to the work of the LSO. You know, they put their community choirs very much at the heart of their programme in a way that, you know, very few other orchestras can.
And is it a busy time? I mean, Christmas is coming. Is it all Christmas concerts at the moment?
We've just had our big family Christmas concert. In fact, the London Symphony Chorus were too busy to sing in it, because they were doing Candide and this piece and other concerts too. So that was given by the Discovery Choirs and by the Community Choir, and a guest gospel choir as well. It was a very varied, very colourful afternoon and evening that was.
Wow, that sounds like an incredible job that you've got.
Yeah, I'm very, very lucky, yes, because the organisation puts singing really at the heart of what it does, which is wonderful, and singing at all ages and also at all levels as well.
Yeah. So I'm sure you're going to go off and congratulate a few people.
That's exactly what I'm going to do.
And maybe have a little drink or two and say well done. Yes.
Another trade secret.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Really
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. So the second half of the concert moves us to a much jazzier place. The first half was about European folk music, but now we go to kind of American, Latin American jazzy place. And we start with a piece by Stravinsky, who himself admitted that he didn't know much about jazz. And to tell us more about that, here's a short film with David Bruce.
Hello, my name's David Bruce. From time to time, us composers get offered commissions for quite unusual lineups of instruments. A couple of years ago, I wrote a piece for Yo-Yo Ma's Silk Road Ensemble, which featured an eclectic mix of instrumentalists from all over the world. And my first thought was to write something that would sit well with the group, that would suit their needs and have interesting parts for all the players. But this was clearly not the approach that Stravinsky took when he was offered the chance to write for the jazz ensemble of Woody Herman's big band. The piece he ended up writing, the Ebony Concerto, was hugely challenging, even for the world-class players of Herman's band. The guys were sweating and nervous, trying to read 16th notes and rests. It was sheer reading agony for guys like us who weren't used to scores like that. Apart from the difficulty, the other aspect the piece makes minimal concessions towards is jazz itself. Take for example the orchestration. Yes, the piece is written for a fairly typical big band lineup of trumpets, saxophones and clarinets, trombones and a rhythm section, although it seems willfully perverse in its inclusion of pretty minor parts for two unlikely big band companions, the harp and the French horn. But it's in the drum kit in particular that you see how little Stravinsky is willing to bend his voice to any preconceived ideas of how a jazz band should play. There are no swinging ride cymbals, no sense of that percussion backbone that runs through all big band writing. The kit is instead very modestly used, limited to just a few military-style rolls in the second and third movements. And a passage just for tom-toms in the first. It's true that the rest of the orchestration does contain a few nods here and there to a traditional jazz sound, but on the whole these are simple effects, jazz gimmicks, like the cute Harmon muted wah-wah at the end of the first movement, or the glissing trombones in the third movement, which nod to Kid Ory and the tailgate style of trombone playing popular in the 1920s. In fact, Stravinsky seems to have known little about Herman's band. He wrote a clandestine note to Herman, signing it under a pseudonym, requesting a representative sample of the band's records. And later he wrote to a friend saying he was unnerved by my lack of familiarity with this sort of thing. So like that trombone trick, if anything it was jazz of a much earlier period, the ragtimes and the boogie-woogie piano of the early years of the 20th century, that show their influence on Ebony Concerto. Take the opening movement, which uses a rhythmic pattern of syncopation straight out of ragtime. Indeed, in his book Conversations, Stravinsky admitted that he was obliged to recopy the first movement of the Ebony Concerto in quavers when the jazz musicians for whom it was written proved themselves unable to read semiquavers. And when you view that passage as originally written, the resemblance to ragtime is even greater. The ragtime resemblance burst into particular prominence for a moment later in the movement in this passage for piano solo. Here, and also prominently in the second movement of the piece, Stravinsky uses a harmony which can definitely be read as bluesy. He clashes major and minor thirds together in a way that reminds you of the unstable thirds of the blues scale. But this is also a technique that Stravinsky had played with in his music for many years. Here's a decidedly unbluesy use of the major and minor third in Les Cinq Doigts from 1921. So its use here, I think, would be fair to say is a happy coincidence that Stravinsky allowed into the piece, knowing that it has a jazzy resonance, but only really allowing it there on his own terms. And the same is true for melody. Take the minor pentatonic melody that starts the third movement. Sure, there's a bit of a sense of bluesiness, but this kind of melody with a limited range that circles over the same small collection of notes had been part of Stravinsky's melodic style since the very beginning. In fact, this bass clarinet solo could have come straight out of The Rite of Spring. So I suppose the point I'm making is, yes, Stravinsky did write for a jazz ensemble, and he wrote a fantastic piece, but in the end, Herman himself was right when he said, it was pure Stravinsky and had nothing to do with jazz.
I'm joined by 3/5 of tonight's saxophone section. This is so exciting to have saxophones in the orchestra. So we've got Andy Finden, Simon Haram and my good friend Sean Thompson. So I'm going to start with a really obvious question. Why don't we see more saxophones in the orchestra? Who's going to answer that one? Andy.
Well, the classical repertoire doesn't call for saxophones. It's a 20th century phenomenon, late 19th, and it's simply not in the major works.
So when was the saxophone invented? Oh, I should have warned you.
1840, 1850. I mean, 1840 it first started to be developed, but you saw it in its finished state.
But then composers didn't kind of seize upon it, did they?
Richard Strauss.
Oh.
He was the first to use a group of them. And they were orchestral instruments in C and F pitch, as opposed to these which are B flat and E flat.
Wow.
because these were military band ones.
Right. I'm learning so much. So we have...
Adolf Sax was actually commissioned by the Belgian army to find an instrument that was the same sort of pitch as a bass clarinet or a bassoon, but wouldn't break on the parade ground. So he came up with the baritone first. So they wanted something low that was a bit stronger.
Right.
And then, because he was slightly mad, he carried on and he invented about 7 or 8 different size saxophones.
And we have 3 different sizes here, right? So what is this?
That's the baritone.
Okay, and is that the biggest?
The biggest in this group.
Right.
But it's an octave below the alto.
So that's the alto.
Yep.
That's the one that people learn, isn't it, that start learning on?
Yes, generally if you're starting at school age, you'll start with this one, mainly because you can get your fingers around the keys. The bigger the instrument, obviously you need to stretch a bit further, but this is a good place to start.
And this
And that's
one
the
is...
middle one, the tenor. So,
Wow. There you go. All the saxophones.
Amazing.
And is
Yep.
there a soprano on stage today?
no, unfortunately
Oh.
not. 2 altos, 2 tenors and a baritone.
And how do you decide who plays what?
I had a car when I went to college.
Okay. So you get given that
Yeah.
to transport that around. But you can all play all of them, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. The fingering's the same on all the instruments, and the way the music looks on the part is the same for all the instruments. So once you learn how to play a B on one saxophone, it's the same on all of them. So the music does the work for you. You don't have to transpose or anything tricky like that.
Right. So obviously the saxophone is associated with jazz and improvising, and I know from going to many a primary school with you, Sean, that you can improvise very well, but no improvising tonight.
No, it sort of it suggests improvising, as in it sounds a little bit like, as you can hear in the background, the clarinet part, and certainly the end of the Bernstein, it does sound improvised. Not so much the Stravinsky, but it's all written out, everything.
All written out.
Yeah, the piano part in the Bernstein is quite fiendish.
And is that weird, it all being written out?
Not really. It happens more often than you'd think. I mean, the way you have to approach it is to put on a jazz accent, but you're not really playing jazz because you've got to play exactly what's in front of you. But if you don't give it a few of the inflections and the way you would articulate the jazz a little bit, it'll sound a bit square. So, but you certainly aren't improvising. You've got to do what's on the page.
So, really contentious question, is it jazz?
Stravinsky wrote Stravinsky but used the instruments in a big band. He didn't write for the big band, he just used that lineup with his style of music.
Yeah.
So this is real Stravinsky, the first piece.
But Bernstein?
Bernstein, a bit more crossover. Yeah.
Which is your favourite?
I happen to really like the Bernstein style.
Sure.
Stravinsky's a challenge.
Yeah. What's your favourite?
I'd go for the Bernstein every time.
Oh, Sean?
Stravinsky.
Really? Oh, that's really wild
Sorry.
card.
There you go.
Well, I should probably let you go and warm up extensively, right, for this?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit of warm up. Thank you so much for talking to me, and enjoy it. I'll see you on there. Thank you very much.
Good night.
So, 3/5 of the saxophone section, which you'll see in the middle of the stage for this second half. So, we have about, I would say, 10 minutes or so. Someone will tell me in a minute before the second half, so I've got just time to tell you what you're going to hear. Now, this is a Golijov sandwich. So we've got the Golijov piece in the middle, and on either side we've got Stravinsky and Bernstein. Actually, Andy said it was a saxophone sandwich because they're in the first and the last pieces. So I'll start by telling you about the middle piece. As we've already heard, it is a sort of shaping of a piece by Golijov from 2000, which is all about St. Mark's Passion. It's the best bits of his piece, taken away the religion, taken away the singing. And he actually said at the time that it should only ever be performed by Venezuelan musicians. So the Lebexis has had to do quite a lot of arm twisting to get this arrangement made. So you see that in the middle, and it's this unusual lineup. You've got the 2 pianos at the front, and then all the wind and brass behind, but in a slightly unusual formation. 12 cellos to one side of the stage, 1 bass on the other side. Very, very strange but fantastic sound, and around the pianos all the Latin percussion you could possibly imagine. And Sir Simon calls this piece a compendium of Latin music. And then before and after that we have Stravinsky's Ebony Concerto, and at the end Bernstein's Prelude Fugue and Riffs. Now these two pieces are companion pieces. They were both written for Woody Herman and his big band, with a prominent clarinet part for Woody Herman to play himself. Whether he played it or not is up for debate. And tonight, in that hot spot, playing the clarinet, we have our own principal clarinetist, Chris Richards, who... I think he might be behind me, warming up now. And those of you that are eagle-eyed will notice that Chris Richards is in every single piece on tonight's menu. So he played in the two pieces we've just heard, and he'll be on the Golijov in the middle. So he's in all 5 pieces, playing solo in these 2 bookend pieces. So that's an amazing night of work for Chris Richards. These 2 pieces are jazz pieces from the standpoint of people who aren't jazz musicians. So Bernstein and Stravinsky are writing really in their own style, but for a jazz band. And there's a lot of classical references. So we have in the Stravinsky a sonata form, a theme and variations, and of course the idea of prelude and fugue is very much from the Baroque period. The only thing I'll say about the Bernstein is the words I've been hearing around here today are things like sexy, raunchy and dirty. That's what you've got coming up in the Bernstein at the end of the programme. And whatever you think about these works, it's a chance for the LSO to really show off, to really let loose and to have some fun. It's going to be a fantastic second half. Before I say goodbye, I should just quickly remind you that if you want to donate, lso.co.uk/donate, anything that you can give us towards these events, bringing you this music around the world for free, we much appreciate it. We're taking a break now for Christmas. The orchestra isn't. There's some more concerts coming up this week and some in Paris. Then we go off for Christmas, and our next stream will be on February the 7th with John Elliott Gardner and the music of Schumann and Mendelssohn, and I'll be here backstage for that. I hope you really enjoy this amazing second half. I hope to see you all again really soon. Goodbye.